Before we get started building our first application, we have to get our mind into what I call the process mindset. And these are four very important ingredients that making application building like we do it in a process-centric and an interact-driven way much more impactful than just thinking about chatbots. Let me show you what I mean. The first thing that we need to know is we need to start talking about multi-step orchestration and not chats. Yes, we do have large language models, and the way why large language models became so accessible to a lot of different people is because OpenAI built a very, very simple ChatGPT interface on top of a large language model. That made it so accessible that basically anyone who has ever used a messaging app, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, whatever, or wrote an email can get something out of that. Which helps for an average consumer who is happy to have a funny little limerick being generated. But if we are talking about actual enterprise applications, we have to realize that a chat application is only one type of application that we build with generative AI. For example, when you interact with a generative AI model with an interactive chat model, the process is like that. You have prompt, answer, prompt, answer, prompt, answer. You're interacting with this model or this user interface just like you were talking to a person that would be there live, sitting to you, thinking and doing. This model is not really thinking, it's a statistical model. And also in terms of the time that you spend, you still spend a lot of time sitting there thinking about the right prompts and reading and then getting something back, iterating until you have something where you are actually happy with the outcome. I would like you to think about it more as an orchestration of different steps that may or may not include a large language model. So you as a user, you trigger a process that consists out of 4 steps. You might want to use different large language models or other models for different steps. You can also go multimodal once you include RAG to put that all together. Ideally with one trigger with maybe a minimal human-in-the-loop approach, then just always on point, getting there and building something from scratch. So I use the term process, and that's what I really would like you to think about. Think about processes. Everything that we do in our business is a process, never mind if it is well documented or not. But every task that you would have to do is in the end a series of steps that you have to execute, and that might be built upon each other. So the thinking mindset that I would like you to get on is a divide and conquer. Instead of I give one monolithic task and say, ChatGPT, do that for me, and then being disappointed when it doesn't do it. Well, there is not really a process understanding within ChatGPT or within any type of large language model, because it's just a statistical model combining things together in a way where it thinks it makes sense. So this here is an example. We are creating here a project proposal for a request for proposals. Yeah. So think about there is a public tender or something, or a tender from a private company, and you are applying to this project. Let's say it's a construction project or it's a software development project, whatsoever. So what you do is you gather material for including the RFP where it says exactly what is needed. You gather your past references so that you can cross-reference, what you have done in certain projects before, and show the one who is offering this project on the other side that you can do what you are promising to do. You sketch a concept, and then you start getting writing. And you don't write that whole proposal in one thing, but you go step by step. You first write the introduction, or maybe you don't start with the introduction. Maybe you start first writing the concept, then you write related works, you write the reference section, and in the end you tell it all together. And that's the mindset that I need you to get in. Divide and conquer. See all of these tasks that you give to a large language model as separate tasks with many different steps that can be worked on independently, and that we can also tweak independently in terms of quality. And that's what we need, process-driven thinking. that we need to translate into a process orchestration. And for a process orchestration, we are building what we call reusable process templates. So these are basically blueprints for every instance of that process. So think about that process for writing an application for request for proposals. If you would, for every time you write a request for proposal, sit there and come up with a specific prompt, with different prompts, iterate over that again, you have a lot of waste. You have gained not much, but you have gained a lot of waste, where you are basically going through the same steps over and over again, just in different cases. Because one RFP, the second RFP, and the third RFP, they are all different cases. They have different documents. They have different projects that are relevant to them. But if we build a process template where we parameterize basically our steps and our things that we are doing with a large language model or with other types of models, then we can gain quite a lot of efficiency. In this illustration, you see here how we would translate this process into something that is a little bit more concise. So in the first step, we have to read over these usually 10, 15 pages request for proposal documents. And when you create an orchestration for that, you of course have to create a prompt, put that to a model, select the right model, and inject the document, the information, the input context that you need. We distinguish between two different types of input. One is case-specific input, and one is case-independent input. Example, you are applying for 4 or 5 different RFPs. The RFP call document where it says, hey, I'm giving out a tender and I'm looking for a company that can do this and this and that for me. That will always be different from case to case. So from RFP to RFP. That's why this is a case-specific input. On the other hand, what we see here about the second step in our process template is searching for a vector in a vector database for similar projects or for a description of a similar project. Our database of where we store of all of our projects, the description of our projects, what we have been doing, our experience, that is independent of the RFP we have. We're just selecting different parts from that database from all of our previous project reports, but it doesn't change the database. So that's why this is a case-independent input. And that's exactly what it is about in the step of building reusable process templates. We have to parameterize these process templates, these prompts, and these connections to each other so that they can handle different input documents, different input data from different sources in a good way, but that we have for each of the individual steps, remember, divide and conquer steps, we have a good way. So if we say, okay, I would like to use GPT-4o Mini because analyzing large documents with GPT-4o Mini is pretty good and pretty cheap, then we have to make a template that says, for this step number 3, always take GPT-4o Mini. The same thing is if you have like an OCR situation, you have a scanned document, and you know these are always very complex HR forms, and you have a specific OCR model, then always make sure that in that template you define that you would like for this task use OCR model A from Microsoft Azure or from somewhere, and in another task use a different model. So tweak it in a way that you have a generalization as much as possible, but you have customization over variables, over templates, and over different steps that are coming together. And that's the going to the last point. I said it in the beginning, many people think a lot about chat interfaces. Chat interfaces are nice if you have some creative task, if you need to think a little bit about where you have something that is always different. But if you have tasks that are always the same, that are reproducible, and where you would like to have reproducible outcomes in a reproducible quality across your whole organization, then a chat application is not the best interface. There are many other different interfaces you can have. Think of it more of you have an application and that triggers a process that does these steps that we have been talking about and gets the output in some way or form into a user interface or to an existing system. So you can build your own custom application. You can also build a chat interface if you want it, You can also have it without any type of interface. So, for example, if you have automated invoice analysis with a large language model, you can have your backend server just triggering one of these processes via an API. You can use one of the auto-generated frontends that we have, for example, in the engine. But the thing is, you always need to be able to provide the case-specific inputs over whatever interface you are using and be able to take up all of our output in and put it into the right places and show it to the right users at the right point in time. And that's the kind of mindset that we really need to get into when we are building not just another chatbot, but we are building AI-powered processes that make our tasks reproducible in a high quality that actually makes impact and saves us time so that we can measure it in our organization.